Sometimes during the creative process, you'll take a look at your project and you'll realize that somewhere along the line, things kind of drifted away from your original vision and you're not 100% satisfied with what you've created. And you'll have to ask yourself, where did things go wrong? In this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about this topic, as well as some things that can be done right from the start of your project to avoid mistakes from happening, as well as some things that can be done if you come to a point where you realize that you're not happy with what you've made and how you're going to fix it. So let's jump into it. Hello, and welcome back to what I am currently referring to as Irwin Memorial Zoo. Even though I will be changing this momentarily, and there are some big changes coming to this zoo, and it may seem a little odd to be doing such drastic changes when I just barely started uploading this to YouTube, but I have spent over a year on this zoo now, and I've learned a lot of things, and I've improved a lot of things. But going back, there are some things that I wish I could do differently with this zoo. So, the first thing you're going to do when you're planning on creating a new zoo is make a layout. Obviously, this seems pretty straightforward, but it's a much more important thing than you might initially think. Now, when I first made my layout for this zoo, I basically just took a piece of paper and put a bunch of circles on it, and in these circles I wrote which species I wanted to go in which spots. And that was pretty much it. That's all the plan I had, and I just loaded into the game and I started building without really thinking about what I was doing. When the reality of it is, we're not just working on a flat piece of paper map sort of thing. This is a three-dimensional layout that we need to be working on, and I wanted to show you a little bit of what I mean. So if I go down to this main path here and I just start following it around, you'll notice that it is entirely flat. Now this is just kind of unrealistic and also very bland. It's easy to do when you're building and playing a zoo because you load into a map and everything's flat and you can just start putting things on the map. But this is not how the world works. The world has hills and dips and divots and valleys and mountains and all these kinds of things. But, this is something I see done a lot in Planet Zoo where people will just put their things on flat ground, and it's something that I did and something that I wish I could go back and change, but is honestly kind of impossible to do at this point without just unearthing entire sections of the zoo. But basically, what you want to do when you're loading into a new zoo file is just do all your terraforming first, and then you can actually start building, because you don't want to build things and then have to try and terraform around them, because that's not going to look natural either. And a big part of this game is trying to make things look natural and realistic, and the truth is, unless you're in somewhere in the Midwest of the United States, you're probably not going to have perfectly flat ground. I was just visiting the DC Zoo the other day, which is the zoo nearest to me, and it's built on a little bit of a hill, and you start on one end and you're at the bottom and you can go all the way up to the top, or vice versa depending on which side you park. But it's just something to keep in mind, and something that adds so much more realism and so much more amounts of, what's the word, I want to say interestingness, but I don't think that's a good word. That is not a good sounding word. It sounds gross when it comes out of my mouth. But interestingness, we're going to go with it for now because I can't think of anything better. It adds so much more interestingness. I can't say it with a straight face. So much more interestingness when your zoo is just slightly slightly on an incline or something like that, or on a hill or something like that. For example, what I wish I had done is just made this end of the zoo slightly lower and just gradually go up. I feel like that would have worked best for this zoo in particular. One zoo that is currently in the works on a different YouTube channel, Rudy Renkimmel's Zoo Sicily, something he did in that was just do all the terraforming for that zoo first. You'll see that in his episode 1 of that. I'll try and leave a card for that, where he just took the whole thing and he built his big hill, mountain, island. I don't even remember what it was supposed to be, but he did all the terraforming first, and then he built his zoo around that, and it has made his layout just that much more interesting. Another thing that you want to keep in mind when you are planning out which orientation you're putting your zoo at is the lighting, because in this game, when you have your zoo oriented a certain way, the sun will always face in a certain direction. And you can change the way this sun goes. You can, put it all the way to sunrise, all the way to sunset, but you're stuck on that fixed orientation. And so something I did, which I now deeply regret, is I put the zoo entrance facing a direction so that the sun never shines on the front face. And this is such a massive oversight on my part, and it hurts a lot of my other builds as well. For example, this Pride Rock that I have here, the sun never hits the front of that either. This giant building over here in the back, the sun never hits the front of that. And the pyramids are always kind of in shadow because the sun only hits the one side sometimes, and it just never works out the way I want it, the lighting in this game, because I just made an accident when I was starting this zoo, and now there's no way to go back. And it's extra important in this game, particularly just because of the way the lighting in the engine works. You can't really perfectly recreate how light works in real life. I think partially because, our eyes can adjust to different levels of light, which the game tries to compensate for that, but it's like it never quite works, and things that are in shadow are always just kind of a little more like muted and dull, and it just never quite looks the same. You don't want a focal point to be in shadow all the time. That's basically the point I'm getting at here. You're going to have these different points of your zoo that you're going to want to look at them and be like, oh wow, this shot right here, this looks great. But if it's just dark, then it's like, okay, well that doesn't look so good now, and I can't get good lighting, so it just never looks that good. Another thing you want to think about, specifically when you're planning the layouts and the views of your habitats, are which way you're going to look at it from, and what the view is going to be like, which is something that I didn't really think about when I was drawing my circles on a piece of paper. So here I have my big savanna habitat, quote unquote, and the viewing in this habitat is honestly kind of abysmal, if I do say so myself. It has a safari ride which goes through it, which is kind of supposed to be like the main way which you're supposed to view this habitat, or at least from a guest perspective. But when you're standing on the outside, it's like you're standing on top of a cliff and you're looking down at the habitat. And something you don't want to do as a guest visiting a zoo is you don't want to have to like be looking down or looking too high up. You don't want to have to crane your neck just to get a good look at something. You just kind of want to walk up to something and just be like, boom, wow, what a great shot. That looks incredible. But this is something that for this habitat, and I made this mistake multiple times where I just kind of like put the viewing too low or too high. And you'll see this sometimes in real zoos too, where like the viewing of the habitat you're looking at is just like kind of awkward. You walk up to a exhibit like the flamingo exhibit at the DC Zoo, and I was just visiting, like the elevation was just like slightly too high, and so it felt like your viewing was just kind of like blocked slightly, and I don't know, it was just kind of awkward to look at. And especially when I built like this little dome thing in the middle to try and have like education and stuff, but like the viewing from here is like especially bad. Like you cannot see anything at all. Another problem with this is that this like canyon valley thing that I put it in is not very natural at all. And so what either would have happened here is somehow this formed naturally, which I have no idea how something like this would form naturally, or the zoo people just came and dug out this gigantic, absolutely massive pit in the ground, which when zoos are being made, you don't want to spend money where it's not needed. And so there's no way this ever would be done in real life. And so basically just everything about the way this habitat is not good. I don't like it. So the question is, when you start making big mistakes like this and you look back at it and you say, "Man, I wish I had done this differently." What do? Now, I was introduced to the concept of breaking and setting bones. It's just what it's called, and that's not literally what we're doing. But I was introduced to this concept by Eben, who also has a YouTube channel. I'll leave another card for his video on this. Anyway, this concept of breaking and resetting bones, where in real life, when you break and reset a bone, it's because it didn't heal properly, and so you need to break it so that it can heal properly. And when it comes to the creative process, when you need to break and reset a bone, it's like when you make something but you are not happy with how it turned out. It doesn't follow your original vision. It doesn't work from a logistical perspective. Basically, something about it is wrong, and so you want to change it. And so basically, you kind of have to just break the bone, rip the band-aid off, or in this case, destroy an entire section of your zoo and just rebuild it. There's not really a better way of putting it than that, but I wanted to use this habitat as an example specifically. This West African lion exhibit, it was the first one that I made when I was playing this game. It's just right in front of the entrance, and I had no idea what I was doing, as I didn't with anything in this game. So I just started building things, and I built a Pride Rock because Lion King is a goated movie. It's my favorite Disney movie. Probably my favorite. It's one of my favorite movies ever, really. But it's gone through very many changes during the time that I've been playing this game. So like the foliage was all weird. I just had to tear up all the foliage, and basically I just learned a lot from watching other content creators on how to make it look better. I'd say Caesar Creates is one of the best people at like detailing habitats for this game. And then some other issues were the safety of the habitats for both the animals and the guests. Realistically, the way it was before is the animals could easily have just jumped over the sides. Really, there's not very much distance here at all. And so I added all these plaster walls in, and I put these fences around the top, and I probably should like put some kind of hot wire around the edges. That's something that I noticed when I was visiting the DC Zoo, is there is hot wire absolutely everywhere, and you wouldn't notice it if you're not looking for it. But since that was kind of the purpose of me visiting the zoo, so I could see more of what zoos were like in person, because I hadn't been to the zoo since I started playing this game. And so, like, that's just something I noticed is hot wire is absolutely everywhere. But anyways, I took my time and I learned things, and I realized that there were issues with this habitat, and so I kind of tore it apart and I put it back together, and I like how it looks now. I think it's actually a good looking habitat now. I'm satisfied with it. There's still some things that need to be done, like obviously the lions could escape right here, but you get the gist of it. It wasn't good, so I just kind of ripped it apart and I redid it, and that's something that it can kind of hurt to do, because you might have put a lot of time into something, and you like you feel attached to it in some ways, but sometimes you just got to do it, and then you rebuild and you are more happy with the final product than you were before. Now, my overall vision for Irwin Memorial Zoo was just to create like the greatest zoo of all time. And as I've realized, as I've gone on through building this zoo, I realized all the mistakes I've made and all the things that are not that good, and how difficult it would be to fix these things. I didn't want that for this project specifically, because it's like a something for me to dedicate to Steve Irwin, who is one of my biggest heroes in life, and I don't want to dedicate something half baked for someone who I look up to so much. And so I eventually I had to come to a decision, and which was basically either like just tear up giant pieces of this project, break and reset the bones, or I could just scrap this project entirely and just remake a different Irwin Memorial Zoo. And neither of these prospects has been super interesting. Definitely not interesting. Neither of these have been desirable for me. I don't want to do either of those things. Those don't sound pleasant to do. And so ultimately, I came to the conclusion that for this project in particular, I needed to just change what it was going to be. I needed to change what I wanted the end result to be. I needed to change the zoo entirely to a different zoo. And so I've decided to put Irwin Memorial Zoo on hiatus to be rebuilt at a later point in time, preferably when I have even more experience. I maybe closer to when Frontier are not releasing DLCs, because a lot of the problem with this zoo is I wanted to put every animal in, so I had plans for every animal, and then a new DLC would come, and then I would have to rip up an entire part of the zoo to make room for the new DLC animals. Anyways, where was I going with this? I'm changing the zoo to be a new zoo. This new zoo is just going to be an entirely African zoo. It's just going to have all the African animals, and that's going to be it. This is not Irwin Memorial Zoo anymore. I've decided that I want to save that for later to be a different project, and I'm renaming this project to something else. So to find a new name for the zoo, I just did a quick Google search on basically the origin of the word Africa, and there's some deliberation on what the actual origin of the word is, but one of the theories that interested me is that it comes from the term Afruika, which is Egyptian. Then it means to turn yourself toward the opening of the Ka. The ka is basically the spirit, and the opening of the ka would be the womb. And since people evolved out of Africa, it's often referred to, or this phrase kind of means the birthplace. And so I wanted to name this zoo to Afrui Ka, the birthplace, or the birthplace of humanity, essentially. So yeah, welcome to Afrui Ka, my new slash old project that is just specifically going to be an African zoo now. Irwin Memorial Zoo will have to wait, but I think that's for the best. I really just want to finish this zoo and put it out there on the workshop for people to see and enjoy for themselves. So that's my new goal for the zoo, is really just to finish it. There's some things that are it's kind of too late to change at this point. Some things that would be way too difficult to go back and redo without just essentially restarting the entire thing. So I'm just not going to do that. I'm just going to finish it the way it is. And it'll be my first ever completed Planet Zoo project when it's finished. So stick along for the ride, people, because I'm going to be trying to finish this hopefully before the next DLC comes out, because I don't want to have to plan to add more more animals, more new animals. So if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Subscribe, like, whatever you want to do. It's up to you. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.